Perfect. Welcome, Adam. Welcome, Michael. Welcome, everyone, to the first episode. Let's call it, or let the first space of DeSci Pulse, a podcast that we're doing together with Michael here today from BiohackerDAO and us, the Data Lake Token Project. And today we have as the host also a very special person, a very special founder, Adam Gries from Vitalism. Hey, Adam.
Great to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Great to have you. And by the way, just to add, so this is an extension of a previous series of spaces that we did from the BiohackerDAO account. It was called DeSci Discoveries. So now we have partnered up with Data Lake and rebranded it to DeSci Pulse. It's going to be even better, even bigger. I want to say even cooler guests, but I would offend the previous guests. I'm not going to say that. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's dig into it. And I think before Adam introduces himself and before we really get going, I think we wanted to just super briefly spend like a few minutes discussing some DeSci news in the space from this week. Do you want to give us your take? What caught your attention this week, Oliver?
Absolutely. So one of our partners, actually, Ethica Protocol, have announced their V3 of the network. It's called the Guardian Hard Fork. So it's amazing that they're actually building. They're building a lot. So this is the third version of the chain, and yeah, I think that's the thing that that has caught actually my eye during this week. There's also been a very nice article from Genomes DAO about how 23andMe is actually stealing your genomic data and how we can actually put the data back into your hands using their technology. So very cool news. How about you, Michael? What did you see? What was the most interesting fact about DeSci this week?
I enjoyed the 23andMe article as well, and they also raised a lot of money. So I'm really excited about what's going to come out of that. But like closer to home, I'm personally looking forward to a bunch of events, DeSci-themed events that I'm going to be attending in the next month or two. So in about a week's time, there is Token 2049 in Singapore. All the crypto people will know about this. It's huge. And what you might not know about, there's a bunch of DeSci events that are tagging on to Token 2049. So on Monday, there is this DeSci Summit, which is going to be really cool. I'm going to be speaking there, a lot of others. I think on Tuesday, there is some longevity and DeSci themed talks, again, organized by someone else. That's going to be really cool. And then on, I think it's Friday or Saturday, there is Brian Johnson's Don't Die Summit. So I think there's a lot to look forward to for people that are into DeSci or longevity, which is very on topic for us today. So I'm quite looking forward to that. And then actually, lastly, the month after that, there is HCT Lana in Chiang Mai, so same region here in Southeast Asia. And I think I was looking at that just the other day, and I think the quality of organizers and speakers there is really, really high as well. So I think it's going to be really cool for DeSci people to attend. They've got basically like a full month of different activities and pop-ups and whatnot. So yeah, just kind of getting excited for all of those.
How come is it that always in Southeast Asia and Asia the events are just so amazing? You know, recently we actually attended the Tokyo Longevity Summit, right? I think we can also tap into that today because we have Adam here that was one of the organizers or even the organizer of the Tokyo Longevity Summit. Am I right, Adam?
Yeah, that's right. It was Vitalism Foundation alongside AK Labs and a couple of other supporting folks, Kamen Shrolev, who's also part of Vitalism Foundation, and others. So, yeah.
Cool.
Well, nice. And yeah, the reason why I'm always talking about Southeast Asia events is because I'm based here, so I'm very biased. I'm sure there is a lot of DeSci stuff going on elsewhere. But anyways, enough about me and going to events. And Yeah, Adam already mentioned Vitalism Foundation, but let's just do a proper intro and please tell us about what it is and what are actually working on and why we should be excited about it.
Sure, and I'll just mention briefly, I'm this is a piece of hot news. I'm actually also going to be at the DeSci Summit speaking on Monday. So next Monday, we can all hang out in Singapore. I very much look forward to it. Yeah, so what am I working on? Basically, trying to elevate and accelerate the revolution against death and aging, meaning how do we as a collective, so humanity, try to fight against death and aging more effectively? Today, we really do it very poorly. Um, the thing is, right, that's kind of like the slogan for vitalism, the philosophy and movement, which is what it is. Um, and it reflects this belief that, okay, well, aging causes the most death. That's why we need to address it. Everybody is on track to die of aging. If they don't die of something else, pretty much whether they like it or not. And so we should really try our hardest to change that. And it starts with the question, well, A, are we making progress? And B, are we trying our hardest? And for me, as an entrepreneur of 15 years, selling a bunch of tech companies, looking at the longevity space and having been interested for a while, around 2.5 years ago, I realized we just weren't moving fast enough. And then, you dig it a little bit and you realize that, well, we're also not making a lot of effort. So in other words, we're making a lot of effort. I mean, I don't need to tell you guys that to address illnesses and just kind of follow the same old sick care, but that's not going to solve aging. And so if we allocate resources 99.9% to just like pathologies and never even try to understand the mechanisms of aging, we're not going to make progress. So then you may ask, well, why do you need a philosophy? Why do you need a movement? And the answer is that if you want to move large amounts of resourcing and create social acceptability and create new policies, things do have to start from an understanding of what the priority is. If we don't have that, it's just going to be everybody for themselves trying to compete for a very limited pie. And so that was one of the big insights behind vitalism being needed as a philosophy. Besides the need to have like a name where people could rally around and say, "Hey, I believe in this, and if you believe in this, that means we should help each other." And we really didn't have that because today longevity, I'm sure you guys are very aware of that, represents a lot of different ideas. Some people mean cold plunges and supplements. Other people mean hardcore biotech in a lab at Stanford or some other university. And so that's kind of the step one in our case. And then the step two is, all right, you want to build an ecosystem. You want to bring people together and elevate that ecosystem so you get more influence. What is an ecosystem? Well, it's everything from DAOs, like the important stuff you guys do, for profits, just like trying to build the Tesla and SpaceX of the longevity space. How do we do that and get a lot more resourcing and influence? And three, nonprofits in government positions, right? Or jurisdictional positions. How do you get people in places of authority to be able to deliver resources where they're needed, change perspectives, change policies, etc.? And so we at Vitalism Foundation, which is a nonprofit that was founded to accelerate the goals of vitalism, are trying to do that in a variety of ways. We have a community now; it's around 1,000 people. We launched late last year, so this is really quite new and growing fast. The people are very committed, so they know what we stand for. There's a Vitalist Declaration, which is a 5-point set of values that we all agree on, which makes it much easier to have trust and collaborate. And then the foundation does a variety of things. So we're hosting a huge pop-up city next year in the Bay Area to serve as a gravity well to attract people to longevity and share our perspective on it. We are working on a token project for a longevity network state. And we just introduced this idea of certified vitalist organizations. So there are many organizations led by founders or who have missions that are aligned with vitalism. We want to help accelerate and elevate those businesses and those organizations. So those are a few of the things that we do and a bit of the story. I'll hand it back to you guys.
There is so much to unpack in what you just said. I'm almost like struggling to figure out where to begin. But what I really like what you just said about like building the Teslas or the SpaceX of longevity. I think that's a really sexy and iconic way to put it. And I would maybe just love to double click on that for a second and how is something like that even going to happen? How can we get to this scenario?
That's a great question. So there are a few ways, and maybe I'll define what I mean by Tesla or SpaceX of longevity, right? So in the case of Tesla, a lot of what Elon has said historically is like, oh, he wanted to solve the energy and climate crisis and transition to a non fossil fuel economy and improve energy, et cetera. And with SpaceX to improve space exploration, right? So essentially, in those two cases, there are companies that are associated with the direct goal, and they produce something for the immediate consumer that can power that financially, right? So it's harnessing the power of capitalism to advance a much bigger goal that may be farther out, right? Because like, the Tesla Roadster was not helping against climate change, right? Like it took years and years, and even now, people may argue like, is it already helping, or will it still take some time? So I think in longevity, that's one way to think about it. In other words, can there be some product or service or platform that people consume today and are willing to pay for that then is both aligned with and paves the way for more longevity, true longevity, meaning expanding health span and lifespan? And you can look at a few examples of that. So you'll have a company like BioAge, right? So BioAge developed this molecule. They just announced that they're going public. That was actually some big news in the more mainstream biotech space in the last week or so, after raising a $170 million Series C. And their molecule stops muscle wasting, so sarcopenia. As you get older, you lose more muscle. It's harder to build muscle, et cetera. This is a big problem with aging because one of the outcomes of that is often that people fall, they break bones, and then it's a negative spiral until death in many cases. And so, how did they raise that money? Well, I'm sure a big part of it was the success of Ozempic, because the big farmers are seeing Ozempic, and as you probably know, a lot of people are complaining about muscle loss. So they lose a lot of the fat, but they also lose muscle. So along comes BioAge and says, oh, wait, we can prevent that muscle loss. So maybe we can be taking in combination with Ozempic, double whammy, this works with the pharma model. Now, the leaders of BioAge are longevity oriented, and they're explicit about BioAge. I mean, BioAge, even in the name, they're a longevity oriented company. So you can imagine in this format that they get their drug out. The drug is wildly successful. They make a gajillion dollars, billions of dollars, and they farm those dollars into more innovations that are pushing the envelope on longevity. So, started out with muscle wasting. Maybe the next thing is, DNA repair or a senolytic or something else, right? And so you could imagine that being a very direct model. Another example of this is, for example, a brain replacement. So, people might have a stroke or get some traumatic injury, like in war or something like that, and they have a brain that needs to be repaired. Well, over time, you may want to also rejuvenate the brain. And so you have this stepping stone or kind of like dual purpose. In this case, it's more of a dual purpose need, right? You repair the brain today for trauma, but you're setting the stage to know how to repair the brain in general for anything, including for aging. And so any of these companies could become very big and drive a lot of change. Those are a couple of ideas. One other path is what I would call the kind of effective altruism model of like earn to give. So there it's like some people will say, well, look, it doesn't matter necessarily if you're working on biotech. What if you just make $1 billion and you, invest in labs that do important longevity work? That's of course not like the SpaceX Tesla model, but I think it's also important to elevate and accelerate people who care about longevity to do more about this. As we know, like most billionaires and most ultra high net worth don't put any money towards longevity. But the few that do can make a big impact, right? Who are the few that do? I can give you 4 examples off the top of my head. Sergey and Larry pushed for Calico, which ended up raising more than $1 billion, maybe $2 billion. Yuri Milner and others, some people say Bezos and others, pushed for Altos Lab, $3 billion, largest seed round in history. Sam Altman supporting Retro Bio with $180 million. And Brian Armstrong, of course, of the crypto category, founder of Coinbase, putting 100 million in new limit. So I think that's also not trivial, right? Making it more mainstream for people who have wealth or aspire towards having wealth to allocate it to this purpose.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I think Elon Musk Neuralink comes to mind as a good example, again, of what you just said. Like they're trying to basically restore some abilities of impaired people, and they're using it as a segue towards ultimately enhancing the abilities of healthy people as well. And I guess that's the mental model you are discussing about longevity and lifespan extension as well, which makes a lot of sense to me. And so then what I'm also curious about is obviously you mentioned that Vitalism is a nonprofit. The idea, the way I understand it, is to basically spread awareness and bring together all these smart and highly motivated people by the mission into the same room, well, virtual room, I guess, in your case, and see what happens, see how it accelerates progress, or like how, I guess how does that more specifically translates to acceleration? Like you mentioned some activities that the group is going to be focusing on. So let's talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, great question. So I'll make one important point, which is that vitalism itself is just a philosophy. It's a movement, a philosophy. Anybody can be a vitalist. You know, if you agree with what we are pursuing or with this philosophy, then you're a vitalist. And I encourage everybody to check that out on vitalism.io. And if they agree to, add vitalists to their social media profile and spread the word. Vitalism Foundation is one vitalist organization, which is, the first one that we started to try to accelerate the goal. And so, to answer your question, what are the foundational things? What are the practical things that we're doing, and how do we see them leading to influence? I'll first say that when you think about getting influence for a problem of this magnitude, one of the challenges is, how do you even map the things that need to be done? Right? Because there are companies that can create impact. Then you have the NIH, for example, which is the largest, that's the National Institutes of Health in the US, for those who don't know. It's the largest biomedical funder in the world for basically basic research. And just to give context, it's about the same as the rest of the world combined. Okay, so this is completely massive. To have people at the NIH allocate attention and capital to this kind of thing makes a lot of sense. But how do you do that? Well, guess what? The NIH budget and allocations are, to some degree, to a large degree, defined by the US Congress. And there's a health appropriations committee, which has 17 people on it, both in the House and the Senate. So there are 2 committees, each with 17 people. And those people, for example, in recent years have passed a mandate to allocate a certain amount of funding to Alzheimer's research. Okay, so just let's imagine this. Let's say you have one person on that committee who stands on their back legs and says, hey guys, look, I don't care about anything else, but we have to put more money into basic science of aging. Because right now, only $300 million of the NIH budget go to that, right? So that's a specific example to articulate how something very, very detailed in government could make a big difference, but it has to be that person on that committee. Another example, when you talk about like government, is ARPA-H. So ARPA-H is a program like DARPA, the Defense Research Arm federal agency in the US, which developed a lot of the innovations of the 20th century. This new organization, ARPA-H, is intended to do that for health. It was brought out under the Biden administration with an initial budget of $1.6 billion. At ARPA-H, you have program directors. each program director commands $100 million budget per tenure, and they can have renewable tenures. And those $100 million can go to either labs or companies as non-dilutive funding, which is incredible, right? So you could imagine it would be very important to have people who are vitalists or vitalist leaning, people who agree with these ideas in program director roles. So how do we try to find people? Like maybe you're a PI at a lab and you haven't even heard about ARPA-H, and we want to find that person and encourage them. Oh, maybe you should apply. Maybe we can help you think about what program ARPA-H may be interested in, et cetera, to the degree that we can. So those are just two examples, and they were very US centric. Just imagine that complexity and copy it to the EU and other places in the world, Japan, et cetera, China. So the reason I'm sharing this, because we talked about the companies earlier, is that the scope of complexity of even understanding where you could pull levers is actually quite large. And then on a parallel level, there's a question of how do you even find people who believe in this? Because until now, it was like this mishmash: longevity, anti-aging, who believes what? Are we even working on the same thing? Like one person is saying, oh, it's fine to die at 90. And the other is person is saying, oh, we should live healthfully, as long as possible, right? These people may not agree on the strategies or tactics or the goal at all. So what we're doing at the foundation, you could think about as a primary initial step, is just finding the relevant people and creating media and trying to create this roadmap of a plan. And so the way to do that is events, creating media like this media today. So if somebody is listening to this and says, oh, I'm interested in vitalism, I may be a vitalist, I want to contribute to this, they can go to vitalism.io, sign up, they can be part of the community, we can accelerate it. And then accelerating specific initiatives, because the foundation itself, our model, we didn't want to be reliant on anybody. So our model is that we're funded by our members, which we call mobilized vitalists, meaning people who are willing to do stuff to advance the revolution. Because ultimately, our theory of change is that we don't need that many people to actually make a big difference, but they need to be motivated to do stuff. And so, the foundation itself, just to give context, you think about the numbers involved. Well, let's imagine you have some number of subscribers, like let's say even, I don't know, 10,000 subscribers, okay, that are paying you $50 a month. How much is that? $500,000 a month, right? Like, guys, I was in building venture-backed companies. What's $500,000 a month? It's nothing. It's like you can't IPO on that. That's like a tiny, tiny company. And having 10,000 people who are willing to do stuff in longevity would be a massive achievement. So I guess my point is that there are these two parallel threads. One thread is the community organizing, the acceleration, the unification, and getting us to that point where we get more positions of influence and help companies and help organizations. But then actually where we get the financial and other influence is going to be those organizations. It can't be the foundation itself. You see what I mean? Just because of the financial realities of what that is. And so I hope that explains a little bit of the context.
Interesting take. Very interesting take, Adam. Thank you. I'm thinking about one thing, just stepping a little bit step back to all people listening, whether on here on Spaces on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, where we're going to distribute this. Just to take a step back, to look at what is actually the problem, right? You said that one person believes, that living until 90 is fine, and others says that living until like 110 or 70 is fine. So what is actually, the exact problem, or what is the vision, right, of vitalism? Is it not dying ever? Is it living significantly longer? Is it being healthier? Is it all of this, right?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think the devil is in the nuance here. So I'll thread that needle and explain exactly what the position is. Most people would agree with the sentence, I want to live as long as possible in great health, right? There's always this question of, well, I don't want to be like, wheelchair bound. But by the way, people who are in wheelchairs don't just want to kill themselves. As a news flash, most people, they are very happy to live in different kind of scenarios as long as they can. But okay, let's just say in great health. Maybe 99% of people who I talk to will agree with that statement. So if that statement is true, then really the only questionable word is what's possible. And so when you say when you frame the question is, do you not want to die ever? Well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like ever, I mean, generally I sympathize with that. So I want to say, yeah, I mean, I want to live as long as possible. So why would I can't imagine a state where I would want to die, although maybe somebody else does want to die. I don't want to force my position on anybody else. I just think that people should be able to live as long as they wish and as long as possible. Sometimes it's very easy to go into these rabbit holes of big words like forever or infinite, which we just don't understand. I mean, does anybody understand what infinity even means? We can't even predict the next election. You're talking to me about like what happens in 100 or 1,000 or a million years. I mean, where are we even going to be as organisms? So I think the answer here is that no number is an acceptable answer to this question. The answer is as long as we can, and we should push as hard as possible as long as life is good. And we believe that that it should be cherished. And I think our lives, our individual lives, are miraculous. It's amazing that we're on this planet and that we have the opportunity to explore and learn and create different things. We should try to stay alive as hard as possible, and unfortunately, we're not doing that right now. So, out of that love for life, and that's exactly why this motto "Choose Life" is the motto that we carry.
I think I can definitely sign up to that. And I'm then really curious to hear about you. Like I guess the biggest challenges of getting those 10,000 people convinced strongly enough that this is an issue. You said if you got 10,000 people to sign up and be supporting members, that would be amazing. So like,
Yep.
what are the biggest challenges of getting to that number?
Yeah, good question. Um, so look, it's just like a startup. So you're looking at kind of like this market, and the market is all of humanity, right? And the question is, out of that market of all of humanity, who in their revealed preference day to day, they don't want to die, they want to live, they want to be healthy. But in their stated preference, a lot of people say, well, I'm fine with aging, I'm fine with death, etc. So how do we identify and what is the scale of the number of people who actually care about the things we care about, and how do we find them? So how do we get to that? I'm just paraphrasing the question. And I think that right now we have certain organizations and groups which attract people who care about longevity, right? People who follow David Sinclair or Aubrey de Grey on Twitter. Well, those people are probably more interested in longevity of the type that we're talking about. They might be vitalists. They just don't know it, but they're vitalists. And so the way you get to those people, I think, is by referrals, by creating media, by creating events and contexts where they can congregate, and then join. So if you think about that, if that's true, then what are the limiting factors? Well, attention and money, right? Somebody needs to sit there and think, how do I create some good media which will attract people? Somebody needs to go to speak at a conference, like I'm flying to Singapore. Guess what? It's a 16-hour flight from San Francisco. It's a long friggin' flight. But I'm doing that because, that's a way to connect with a lot of people. But if I could clone myself, or if there were more people, available to do this kind of work, and there are, and it's growing, it's snowballing because you get more local leaders who want to lead their own areas. And I'd love to focus, on wherever I am, of course, as well. And that way, I think we can accelerate. So it's really all about getting more people, more money, more media, and I think then we're just going to get to the goal.
Thank you. I actually have an interesting, a little bit controversial question, since what you said, because there's a few, whitelists that they don't know they're whitelists yet, right? They're not mobilized, they're not part of the communities, but they might be doing what we already do, aiming for the same goal. And then there are people, that they don't really care. They didn't really choose life yet. So what
Sure.
what do you actually believe, is more important? Is it mobilizing this masses that already do what we do, or is it educating, new people, to come to the side of longevity?
Yeah, I think it's coordinating the people who already do what we do, because that's a large fraction. We estimate it at about 1 to 3% of humanity. So I've spoken with thousands of people about this topic. And I feel I have enough evidence to say that the general preference to live as long as possible. So, in other words, just intuitively, right? When you ask somebody, how long do you want to live? A lot of people, their off the cuff response will be some number 80, 90, whatever they kind of have as their context. But some fraction of people, without getting any guidance, this isn't like them talking to you before or anything like that, will just not respond with a number. They'll say, oh, as long as I'm healthy or as long as possible or whatever it is. And because I believe that's some non 0%, maybe 1 to 3% of the population, you do the math on that, that means it's like 80 to 240 million human beings. Okay. Now, I want to give you some numbers for context in New York. They wanted to put together this Amazon headquarters. I don't know if you heard about this. This was 2-3 years ago, and there were unions who were opposed to it, and they managed to stop it. And you know how many people were in like the main union who was fighting this? 20,000. New York State has like 20 something million people. So my point in that is that very organized, even if small groups can have just incredible impact. I don't need to tell you about how that's true in startups, right? When WhatsApp sold to Facebook, it had 53 employees compared to Facebook's, I don't know, 10,000. And yet WhatsApp was a quote unquote threat to Facebook. So it had to essentially basically merge with it because WhatsApp got an amount of money, which was representing about, I don't know, 19% or something like that of Facebook's market cap. So small numbers do make big differences, and that's why I think we need to focus on people who are already aligned. It's going to be much easier and much more likely that they'll get activated.
Thank you.
A small group of highly aligned revolutionaries. I think you actually refer to them as revolutionaries, right?
But it's
Yeah, and yeah, go ahead.
it's always about the 0.1%. It's never about the 99%. I mean, but at the end of the day, when there's a group that's mobilized, wants to make an impact, all you really need is a really small percentage.
Look, here's the thing. We it's easy to artificially separate these concerns and these groups, but ultimately, as we move forward as a collective, what happens is that new ideas and behaviors are almost pulled out of the collective and they end up being led by small groups, but they're kind of a representative of the reality. So in other words, if you think of like the Industrial Revolution, which birthed modern liberalism and socialism, etc., why did it birth those things? Because there were economic realities, right? The farmers, the serfs were moving into the cities, they were getting more money. These people had more time, they're talking, there's a middle class. The middle class is trying to look for a philosophy to explain like why they're middle class and how they can express their new power compared to the powers that be. And so in the same way, if you look at the longevity context, do you guys know how many over 65-year-olds there were in the US in 1880? Do you guys want to guess? Anybody want to guess? What percent of the US population was over 65 in 1880?
Like 0.1 would be my
It was 2.7%. Okay? So it was
Wow.
rare to meet an old person. This was like a real exception. You had like these wizened people once in a while, etc. And that number by 1920 had only gone up to 4 point something percent. So in the time when my grandfather was born, which was the early 20th century, there was like you wouldn't meet a lot of old people. That wasn't like a thing. And today in a place like Japan, do you guys know what percentage it is over 65?
It's gonna be a high percentage. I know that Japan's very famous for living long. So
Yeah.
my shot
What's
would
your
be around 15 to 20%. That might be a little bit too high, but
Okay, great guess.
yeah.
In the US, it's 17%. In Japan, it's 29% as of 2024. So think about the implications of that. And 1 in 3 people is an old person in Japan. This is just monumental. So when you look at that and you realize, oh shit, for the first time in history, aging is the thing that's actually killing the most people, not infectious diseases. And there's so many people who are aged. They're just like everywhere. And with a declining population, they're going to be a larger and larger percentage. It's just inevitable. We can see the trend. So in that sense, what I'm saying is that everything from Brian Johnson to David Sinclair to like Andrew Steele to even vitalism, right, is coming in the context of a change, a much bigger change than any of us individually, which is just pushing us to confront aging, whether we like it or not. Now, of course, I'd like to think our philosophy is special and wonderful, and that I would have come up with it, alongside other people who came up with vitalism 50 years ago. But I don't know that for a fact. I, I have to be humble and say, well, this is contextual, right?
You know, I just thought about one thing, that actually there's like 0.7 babies per like one person, one woman in Korea, right? So the rate actually of people, over the age of 65 in Japan is so over the rate of, newborns in South Korea. That's crazy, actually.
Which, by the way, Elon posted about this recently, and a few other people on Twitter, and they're saying, well, yeah, societies can get into a death spiral. And what is that death spiral? It's basically when the proportion, democracies especially, right? When the proportion of the voting population reaches a certain critical threshold. Now, just think about it. There's so many older people and a lot of older people are more likely to vote, as you probably know, in many democracies, they have more time on their hands, they're more motivated, etc. Those people are always going to vote for things that benefit them. I mean, like it's pure, just basic self-interest, right? So you have a center of gravity which is going from the young to the old in democracies, which makes it very hard to move things for not short-termist things, right? Because just imagine you're an older person, you have arthritis, you're worried about these diseases of aging, and here comes Michal or somebody and says, "Oh, hey, we should put this dollar into research." What are you going to say? You're going to say, "Fuck no, put it into arthritis. That's my problem. Put it into some other issue that can help me right now," right? So we have a structural problem too, where people often don't do what's in their own benefit in the, let's say, 10 to 20-year term.
It continues to amaze me how many people, or maybe the majority of people, still don't really recognize this population structure that's so heavily skewed towards old people, like you said, as a really big problem. I don't know why, but it seems to be the case. And I agree, we do need to recognize it, and we do need to be taking drastic steps to address it. And now I was just thinking, while they were speaking, like I would love to just imagine for a second and fast forward, like, I don't know, 100, 200 years into the future. Let's say vitalism has been a success. We have managed to achieve significant, near infinite, whatever, life extension. Like what does a society look like right now? Like is the percentage of people over 65 now even higher? Is it like 80%? And are young people and kids really, really rare? And is this and is everybody accepting this and okay with that? Or like what? I don't know, like what are the possibilities of like what do we unlock when we get there?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many variables in this equation. Let's try to explore a few together. So, in 100 years or something like that, a few parallel things are happening. On the one hand, you already have designer babies, right? If you have a child with sickle cell anemia, you can identify that genetic abnormality. We call it abnormality, right? Because it's not typical and it's not as functional, even though like genes don't know about abnormalities. They're just genes, right? And we can identify that with different companies today, and you can modify that gene. So you can do it and then prevent the child from having sickle cell anemia, right? So just imagine that in the future, we are much, 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 much more sophisticated about bioengineering. This is like pretty much an inevitability. It's already happening today. So that's like one thread that's going to happen in the future. So in that context, if you're having a child, you might be modifying that child. I mean, it sounds crazy, right? But we only do it in the case of like what we call pathologies today. But where do you draw the line between pathologies and other things, right? If your child has a ApoE4 gene, which creates a proclivity to get Alzheimer's, Are you not going to switch it to an ApoE2 gene? But then, it's a slippery slope, and I'm sure we're going to go down that slippery slope. That's inevitable. Separately, you have regenerative medicine, so people can have body parts replaced, or this already happens, right? But at a certain scale. So we're going to have more and more of that, right? Your skin burns off. Even today, we create new skin, we put it on, and people are very grateful to get that new skin, right? So I think you end up in a world where people are, if we're, the way we are today. So, let's say in the larger sense, kind of these, the same biological organisms, I think people will likely be more intentional about how they procreate, right? Like, why do you want to have a child? And do you even birth a child? Like, we're talking about artificial wombs. So essentially, you're divorcing, you're creating the components of all the pieces of this puzzle. On the one hand, how do you combine the DNA to create the new life? On the other hand, how do you nourish the new life into creation in a womb? And then who raises and supports that new life, and who provides resourcing for it, etc. I think those things will be reorganized and recombined in different ways. And then the question will be, well, okay, so what happens to the human population at large as a result of this kind of change? And my sense is that, as somebody who has two kids, that it's likely, on the one hand, you have this poll that says, well, having kids is very costly in terms of resources, right? You want to give them the best attention. I mean, even me with two kids, some people have six kids. I just like marvel that they can give attention to six kids. How can they even know what's going on? I mean, full chaos in my mind, right? It doesn't matter how much money you have. You only have so many hours in the day and so much energy. And so I kind of feel from that perspective, people will be less motivated. So there's a poll pulling people to say, have less kids, just fundamentally, because you want to give better attention. And if you live longer, you have less urgency. And this is also just generally the case today, right? You postpone having kids already in society because you want to nourish your career, and people have a lot higher life expectancy. So they feel like they can postpone it to later. And then on the other hand, it really depends. The other pole is the pole of, do we have abundance? So to what degree does the economy support the ability to raise kids, et cetera, in a way that doesn't harm the quality of life of the parents, which today is the problem in many upper income countries, right? It's not that people don't want to have kids so much. It's that it's actually difficult to have kids and sustain the quality of life that they're accustomed to. So you live in a major city, London, Helsinki, New York, Tokyo, wherever. I mean, it's expensive. It's expensive to get kids to the right schools. It's hard to get enough space to live in and feel comfortable. So often parents actually degrade their quality of life by having kids. And so when you think about a future world of potential abundance, the more abundance that we have, the more will be pulled towards people wanting to have kids. And then, if you think about the downstream effects of that and where it ends up in terms of the overall population, it's just too hard to predict. It's very complicated.
I agree with you. I just like to go down the imagination lane for a second. Yeah. And for the record, none of those things that you mentioned sound too crazy to me. As a co-founder of BiohackerDAO, it's definitely a future that I'm excited about. So
artificial babies, don't they sound crazy? Artificial wounds, not babies, right? And then you have basically like baby forms, baby labs, or whatever you call it.
I mean, you say baby labs, but people already use surrogates, right? So what's a surrogate? It's just a biological quote unquote artificial womb, biological external womb. Like, you're getting your baby, it's your genetic material, and if you choose not to be at the birth, you're basically seeing some person on Zoom. Then you go to a clinic, they take your fertilized embryo, right? Your sperm and egg, your fertilized egg. They put it in this person who is somewhere else. And you could, I imagine most cases in surrogacy, they meet, or they have to meet, I'm not sure. But just imagine if you don't meet them, like literally you don't know where the baby came from. The baby just emerges at some point, and it's like, oh, here's your baby. So it's not, as long as the technology works, it's evident that currently people are already willing to do this.
It makes perfect sense. Like, pregnancy is a really messy and painful business, and most of the female friends that I have my age, they like a lot of them that don't want to have kids, and if they do want to have kids, they're really scared of getting pregnant or giving birth, and they're like, yeah, there's a lot of apprehension around that. So
There's the other side of things, that this might even convince the people that, right now don't want to have babies to actually go ahead, and have them. So I think it has also the positive side of things, not just, not being at the birth.
For sure.
Cool. Let's maybe bring it back to present and to vitalism for a second. And I think we covered a lot of ground, and that is really great. We talked about mobilizing people, getting this small number of active revolutionaries activated, lobbying governments, organizations, putting people in positions of power and decision making. And you also very briefly teased a vitalism network state, pop-up city, token, this kind of things. So I would just love to hear a bit more about those as much as you can share.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So, I'll start with the pop-up city. As probably some of our audience is aware, there's this trend towards exploring different ways of living together. And one example is Zuzalu, which was initiated by a bunch of people, including Vitalik Buterin and others in the DeSci space and crypto space and longevity. And the idea is, okay, how can you bring people together to live for a longer period, let's say a month, 2 months, something like that, not just a visit, and demonstrate a new way of communicating, living, etc. And that creates like a gravity well, which enables emergent behaviors to imagine kind of a better way of living. And we think that's very interesting because we think the communities of the future will be longevity oriented. And so it's an important exploration in how to define that and eventually create permanent representations of that. Now, in addition, pop-up cities are, because of their kind of semi-permanency, can attract a lot of people to come to a place which becomes, I would describe it as an artificial density hub, right? When you go to that place, you're suddenly surrounded by people who care about this. And it feels like you have permission to explore and to learn and to accelerate. And so we're doing pop-up city in the Bay Area, Vitalist Bay. It's going to be next year, April and May. Currently, this is only open to mobilized Vitalists to sign up. So if you go to vitalism.io and you sign up with your email, you have the option to become a mobilized member. That costs something, but if you can't afford it, you can set your own price. We think that most people can afford it, and it's a way to be part of the community and get a lot of benefits and accelerate things. And so you can register for this. It's going to be a 2-month event, basically 8 weeks of incredible, you could call them segments that cover everything from regenerative medicine, longevity investing, cryopreservation, the traditional biotech route, and more in biohacking as well. And of course, I look forward to you guys also being involved in it. And the idea is that the scope of this, and you can register your interest at vitalistbay.com, is intended to attract all this attention and also potentially funding, et cetera, in the Bay Area to this topic. Because if you think today, is there anything in the Bay Area that is a permanent place, or even semi-permanent place, that articulates this vision, brings people together? We really think there isn't. So that's one big thing we're doing. I'll also shout out briefly that there's another pop-up city starting in Berlin very shortly called Zeller, ZELAR.city. You can register there. That's also a Vitalist initiative and a longevity pop-up city. And I recommend checking that out as well. And so that's one area. Then longevity network state. When we think about how to build something like that and its relationship to blockchain, we have this project. It's called Vitalist Republic. You can go to vitalistrepublic.com also to register your interest, to get more information. we can't share too much yet, but we will soon. Generally, the idea is like, well, how can we coordinate decision making? So let's just imagine all three of us want to create some influence, right? It may make sense for us to live in the same place. How do we decide where to live? Well, we need to somehow have a mechanism. Blockchain affords that kind of mechanism very well to co-vote, even if we don't know each other, for how we align and deploy resources. If we want to accelerate the arrival and access to therapies and other benefits that have to do with longevity, how can we mobilize to pool our resources to do that? I mean, we currently, like, there's not a really good way. Like, if I said, hey, like, I have $500 that I want to put towards this, and somebody says I have $200 that I want to put towards this to have, like, whatever, anything from a therapy to a longevity club to other things that would benefit us, to source a great doctor who actually knows what they're doing in this. There's no way for us to collaborate. There's no like place we could put this. I mean, there are different things that are doing amazing things for the science, and doing some things for this kind of stuff, but they're not really longevity state oriented. And so that's the whole that this initiative is intended to solve. Vitalist Republic, which you can find at .com.
When Vitalist token?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think probably the lawyers would say we can't say anything about that yet. It's too early, but it would be great to have to figure out a way to deploy something in the next 6 months. Maybe on the earlier side of that. So, stay tuned, and people who are involved early will of course have the information as soon as we have it. So.
Looking forward to that. And just for the record, we're not promoting any tokens or any financial investments whatsoever on this podcast.
We are for
But yeah.
sure promoting, the ability to choose life, to get interested in longevity and support
sure.
Such causes. So, me personally, I'm gonna look into the Berlin event, Adam, because it's the first time I hear about it, and I have it pretty close by. But as you already mentioned before, some of the people, they don't mind traveling 18 hours to the other end of the world. So,
100%.
Perfect.
Nice. And we're almost on time. We've got a couple of more minutes left here. I just wanted to give a shout out to our audience in the X space. If anybody has got any burning questions that you guys want to ask Adam, you can raise your hand. We will put it up on stage, and you can go ahead and ask.
You're all invited. Yeah,
if you don't,
come ask.
Yes,
Ask
don't be
us
shy.
or Adam a few questions. So the ones that are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, feel free to take this minutes to follow us and not miss the next episode, also coming up hopefully shortly.
And I guess if we don't have any questions, we can just proceed to some closing thoughts.
Yeah, I guess anybody, if you want to say anything, yeah.
What do you want to add, Adam? Like anything that we didn't ask you about, or any other alpha you want to share?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is to really close is that look, if you care about living much longer, living as long as possible in great health, then you should do something about it. And if you're not doing something about it right now, or if you even just agree with the ideas that we're talking about here, then you should join us. Go to vitalism.io, sign up with your email. Doesn't cost anything. If you are the kind of person who wants to do something and accelerate, I think you should also become a mobilized member. It doesn't cost much. It could cost as little as a cup of coffee a month or something like that. You get and you get a lot for it, and be part of a community that's actually making this happen. Because if we don't take our destiny in our own hands, nobody's going to do it for us. I mean, we saw during COVID how the powers that be mismanaged the situation. I think there's no disagreement on that. How dramatic that was, and so we need new systems and new opportunities to create change. So I hope you join us, whether in that way or if you're curious, join at vitalistbay.com or vitalistrepublic.com. and that way we can make that difference together.
Perfect. Thank you. So I see some people raising up the hand, requesting a speaker. So if you guys are still with us, Victoria, Maya, happy to invite you up to the floor to be the speakers and ask your thoughtful questions.
Oh, awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Adam. That was a great conversation. Thank you so much for bringing up about the conversation about Zeller as well. I'm working hard on building a great experience for Zellers today. And unfortunately, I cannot be in Southeast Asia, but I bet there will be a great event. DeSci, what's the name of it? DeSci Southeast
Summit.
Asia? Oh, the DeSci Summit, yes. Yes, I know VitaDAO is going to be there and all the other people interested in the space. I was thinking maybe you can touch upon the idea of having the healthy lifestyle in the conversation. Like I know there's a lot of like controversy around should we do this, should we promote this or not? Is this even needed? Or how much is this helping our mission on exponentially extend lifespan? And how was the event? I know you talked at the SF Summit
The
event.
Don't Die Summit. Yep.
Yes, that one.
Yeah, great questions. So, having great health, promoting great health, employing best practices, and disseminating them in our community and outwards with what we can do right now, I think is necessary. It's not sufficient, but it's absolutely necessary. If we're sitting around here eating Cheetos and saying, "Oh, great, I want to live longer," etc., and not doing any exercise and not taking advantage of the opportunities we already have, because exercise is still and nutrition are our best medicine, you could say, for most people. Then number one, we won't benefit ourselves. Number two, we will lose a lot of credibility. And so I think those are absolutely necessary, and that we can actually push the envelope, and that we should be better than anything else out there, not least because we can have the integrity of not trying to sell something. We're not a supplement company where we don't have an agenda of like getting you to sign up to our longevity concierge service or whatever. Nothing wrong with those, by the way. Some of them are fantastic. I even use some of these services. But we as a community, I think, do need to integrate the best practices in health. So I totally believe in that. I try to live it to the best of my abilities myself. The sleep is kind of suffering because I have a 1.5-year-old. But other than that, I think that's very important. And then Don't Die Summit. I thought it was great bringing people together. It's very interesting to see the communication. So at the event, and this is fascinating, people were much more likely to say they want to live much longer than I've experienced elsewhere. So, in other words, because of the social context of the event being named Don't Die, I think there was actually a resistance to give a number when I asked, "How long do you want to live?" Which is like a typical question that we'll ask. And one thing I wonder about that, and this ties into a conversation that I had with one, let's say, pretty successful attendee who has he's gone to a bunch of companies, was this conversation around, well, does Brian mean just don't die today, or don't die ever? You know what I mean? So in other words, the recipient of this kind of message of don't die can feel like they have the social pressure to say, "Oh yeah, don't die. That means I want to live indefinitely," right? But then at the same time, they can compartmentalize that and say, "Well, but it doesn't mean don't die at 80. It's still fine to die at 80. We're just saying that it's more of a figurative speech to take care of yourself." And I don't think that's what Brian is saying at all. I think Brian is saying don't die, period, today or at all, as long as we can. You know what I mean? Like there are a variety of I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I think it's pretty clear that he doesn't have like some artificial arbitrary limit in mind in his conversation. But I think we're pushing the envelope on both the communication and the underlying, and it's going to be a process because people are at different places where they engage with these ideas.
I think, to every cause there has, to every problem there has to be an ultimate goal, and undying today might be just not ambitious enough.
Right. I mean, it kind of follows, right? If tomorrow is the today of tomorrow, right? So why would you want to die then? I mean,
Yeah.
but it's hard to wrap your head around that. For people who are just I'd say influenced by the what they grew up with.
Absolutely. Thank you, Victoria, for the question. Maya, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. So I just signed up for the Vitalism newsletter, but I was wondering if there's any publication that you know of that's has the most up-to-date information on longevity research, like the really cutting edge, newest stuff. How can I be in the loop about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the gold standard for this has been Nathan Cheng's longevity biotech newsletter. So I recommend, and he's also, one of the co-initiators of Vitalism. So he and I were basically started this idea about a year and a half ago and developed it together. You can follow him at Real Nathan Cheng on Twitter at Real Nathan Cheng, and sign up to his newsletter. You'll probably see it on his Twitter. So I think that's best. He doesn't release it that often because he's working on so many things related to vitalism and also longevity biotech fellowship (LBF). Besides that, I mean, there are a few sources of information that I think are generally good. Lifespan.io, lifespan.io typically it has its finger on most of the pulse. There's a kind of AI generated newsletter that you can sign up with Peter Diamandis, which I find has mixed data. Sometimes it captures stuff that's really up to date. Sometimes it's more just stuff around more health and not really a longevity biotech. So it kind of depends what you're looking for, and there may be a few others that escape me right now, but you can start with those two.
Great. Thank you. So I think it's about time we wrap it up. It's been a very great hour here together with and Adam. Thanks, guys, for tuning in to today's DeSci Pulse podcast organized by Data Lake and by BiohackerDAO. And thank you for accepting the invitation, Adam. It was very lovely to have you here. And we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, guys.